Good evening. How you guys doing today? All right. Well, we want to welcome you here. We're the Compton NAACP, working in conjunction with the city of Compton. And so we're happy to be here. We have our LA District Attorney, Mr. Hoffman. He's going to be here to answer some questions. And what we're really trying to do is really get on the same page and do what's called finding a common ground. And it really starts with communication. We had an upstairs meeting and Mr. Hopkins talked about the carrier is now pointing in the right direction. Now it's just time to go to work. So what we want to do tonight is we have a couple of people to come up, make some announcements, make a couple presentations. Then we have a Q&A plan, and we want to hear from the audience. So we have someone with cards. If you have a question, at the end we're going to have a Q&A for the audience. So raise your hand if you have a question. We'll get you a piece of paper, put your question, put your name on it, and then we'll collect them. In time permitting, we'll get as many questions in as possible. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Good? Okay. My name is Gary Polk. I'm on the board with the NAACP. I'm the education chair. Yep. All right. So, with that said, let's bring up Paulette Gibson. Where is Paulette Gibson, our president? There she is. Let's give her a big hand, please.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you guys so much for coming out to support us having the DA come to Compton. I just want to say, as president of the NAACP, you might see quite a few members with t-shirts on, and some officers should be here. I want to thank all the members of the NAACP for coming out and participating and be willing to come out and ask the hard questions. And that's what we're here for tonight. We're here just to make sure that we have questions that are asked, that we get the answers, and we're going to operate in a respectful and dignified way because we're here for something that's very important. And we want to make sure that the reason that we're here is to make sure that we understand how our community could be best served and helped by the district attorney's office. So again, I want to thank you guys and all the other organizations that participated with questions and that are here tonight. We thank you guys for taking your time out to come out tonight. So at this time, we're going to turn it back to our moderator to bring up any other speakers from the field.
So now it's my esteemed pleasure to introduce our mayor, Mayor Emma Sharif. Let's give her a big hand, please.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. First, I would like to thank all of you for coming out here this evening, and because this is something I feel is extremely important for the city of Compton. I want to thank you all for being here. Now I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our guest this evening. And our guest is none other than District Attorney, Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, Nathan Hotchman. Mr. Hotchman has dedicated his career to upholding justice and ensuring fairness within our legal system. This town hall is important for our community to learn more about the law, how the District Attorney's Office works, and the role it plays in keeping our city safe. Understanding our rights and how our justice system functions is an important step toward building trust, transparency, and stronger community partnerships. Here in Compton, we know that knowledge is power. By engaging directly with leaders like the District Attorney Hotchman, residents can gain valuable insights into how laws are applied, what resources are available, and how we can all play a role in shaping a safer and more informed community. With that, please join me in giving a warm Compton welcome to Los Angeles County District Attorney Nathan Hotchman.
Thank you very much, Moderator Polk and Mayor Sharif. The first time I met Mayor Sharif, I had the opportunity to come to Compton because I wanted to get some more information. What had happened right after New Year's Eve, about 2 in the morning, is that one of the iconic bakeries here in Compton, Reuben's Bakery, it had a street takeover happen right in front of it. You know, you had basically a couple hundred young people with a variety of cars that had just taken over that street intersection at 2 a.m., right after January 1st. And sure enough, what happened is a 13-year-old got a stolen car, and he rammed it through the grates of Reuben's Bakery, knocked him over. And all of a sudden, dozens and dozens of young people ran into Reuben's Bakery and ransacked the place. Now, I showed up about 2 days later. I'd heard about Reuben's Bakery. I thought I needed to see it myself. And the things that made a lasting impression on me were, first, the destruction that had happened to a bakery that had been there almost 50 years. And I met Reuben Sr. and Reuben Jr., and the fact that they were still there. They said, look, we're going to rebuild this bakery. And actually, I saw people from the community coming by and actually helping them keep that bakery open, helping them restock their shelves, helping them make sure that this bakery didn't go anywhere, that it was part of the community, it was going to be supported by the community, and that was the message they wanted to send to the outside world. I saw a problem going on, that there had been dozens of young people under 18 that had gone ahead and thought there was no consequence. If you want to go into Reuben's Bakery, take whatever you want, run out, and nothing was going to happen. And quite candidly, they were right. The DA's office had a policy in place that basically said they weren't going to be prosecuting juveniles, people under 18, who had basically committed misdemeanors stealing just under $950. And so I said, that's wrong. Then I had a chance to meet the mayor. And the mayor gave me sort of a real interesting street-level education as to what was going on right there in the community. She talked to me about what was going on Long Beach Boulevard. I had no idea of basically kids that were being walked to various schools where prostitution was occurring and where laws had been in place to deal with it before. Those laws had been removed, and they were having serious problems on Long Beach Boulevard with prostitution and human trafficking. And it was an eye-opening experience for me. You know, the type of experience you actually can only get if you show up in the community. So one of the reasons I'm here tonight is, again, to show up in the community, to hear directly from our moderator, eventually from this audience, the questions and the concerns of what's going on in this community. You know, I'm wonderful. I had when I became the DA back in December, I'll tell you one of the great it wasn't even a surprise, but it was just beyond my expectations, was the level and the quality of the prosecutors that I now get to work with in the DA's office. I get to work with about 800 prosecutors. And we have a whole bunch of them here today. If you could raise your hands for the audience and let them know some of the prosecutors that are here tonight. And these prosecutors right here, I mean, they represent, if you had to, I'm going to embarrass them a little bit. If you brought together their collective prosecutorial experience and added the years together, that is well over 100 years that we have right in this room from the 4 prosecutors that are here. That is the type of experience they bring to help us make really good decisions on how to promote justice, promote safety, promote accountability, which has been missing. Accountability, but do it with a common sense, sort of compassionate but firm hand. That's what these prosecutors help me do every single day. And we're going to be tackling the big issues. There's no more kicking the can down the road. These are big issues that you'll hear about and we'll discuss, whether it's street takeovers, whether it's fentanyl poisoning, whether it's human trafficking, hate crimes, whether it's a homeless crime, you know, whether it's residential burglaries or organized retail theft. We have prioritized these cases because, again, they are the cases that affect people every single day. They're the ones that are affecting your quality of this community and making it either a community that you can't wait to live in and tell people to come here, or you have to answer questions to your friends on why you're living here. That's unacceptable. You know, the number one thing that government owes everyone in this room and everyone in this county is their safety. We have to provide an environment where you can raise your family in this community and not worry about your safety, where you can have a thriving business in this community and not worry every single day that you're going to get robbed, where your kids can go ahead and go to schools and you don't have to worry that this is the day that somehow fentanyl got into their bodies and might take them down. So these are the challenges we have. Now I will tell you, even though I have 800, some of the best prosecutors in the nation, I'm working with some fantastic law enforcement officers. The only way we're actually going to solve these problems is if I can also rally you folks, the public, to be the eyes and the ears out there in the community, tell us what's going right, and tell us, as importantly, what's going wrong, to even help us figure out the solutions to these problems. So that's why I'm here tonight. I want to actually do my best to tell you what we've been up to the last 10 months since I've been the DA, the changes that we've made, and what the solutions hopefully look like going forward. So, Mr. Moderator, we are ready for your questions.
Fun part. I just get to ask the questions. He had the tough part of answering the questions. But one of the things I think you said that was really important, finding a common ground, and maybe that common ground is our safety. We have citizens that want to live in a safe city. We have police, law enforcement. We have a district attorney, and it's all about safety. So let's kind of bear that in mind. So the first question we have is about fentanyl and drug crimes. And the question is, how does your strategy on fentanyl differ from previous administrations, and what specific outcomes will you use to demonstrate its effectiveness? The second part, how will your office track overdose rates in relation to prosecution rates?
So I spent my formative years, 30 plus years ago, as a federal prosecutor, and I did narcotics trafficking cases. And I must tell you, when I started my campaigning years ago, I didn't really appreciate fentanyl. I mean, I dealt with the whole range of drugs: marijuana, cocaine, ecstasy, heroin, take your pick, methamphetamine. But fentanyl was something new, because fentanyl didn't even hit the West Coast till 2017. Now fentanyl will be the #1 killer of people between 18 and 40 years old. It pulled that off in 8 years. It literally is a drug that if we don't get our hands around the fentanyl poisoners, and I call them poisoners on purpose, because fentanyl is not designed to get you high. It's designed to kill you. So if we don't get our hand around the fentanyl poisoners, both in the enforcement aspect of it and the education aspect to the young people, if you don't already know some family that has suffered the tragedy of losing a son or a daughter to fentanyl poisoning, the weight is escalating in an exponential growth. I will guarantee you in 4 years you absolutely will, if we're not able to take some serious action against fentanyl. And why is fentanyl such a devastatingly poisonous drug? Well, 2 milligrams will kill you in 2 minutes. It is that powerful. It's 50 times more powerful than heroin, 100 times more powerful than morphine. You know, they call it the one pill can kill campaign. And they're dead serious. Millions of counterfeit pills come across our southern border into California, into Los Angeles County, and they're doing it on a weekly and monthly basis. Now remember, 2 milligrams will kill you in 2 minutes. What's happening is that there's a whole variety of these fake pills, counterfeit pills out there. So your son, your daughter, your niece, your nephew can go on the internet right now, grab their phone, go to probably Snapchat or one of these places to find stuff on the internet. Type in, something like Oxycontin, Xanax, Percocet, Adderall, and go get a fake pill, costing $10 to $20. What they don't know is that 7 out of 10 of those fake pills have a lethal dose of fentanyl. A lethal dose of fentanyl. And fentanyl doesn't care what race you're part of, it doesn't care your ethnicity, religion, it doesn't care if you're male, female, whatever. It is an indiscriminate killer. And the analogy that I've given, the reason I want to just focus on it one more level, is you have to understand what a threat this is. Imagine this. Imagine there was a sniper that was on the 405 freeway. And every day that sniper was going to randomly kill 7 people. And the sniper's aim was perfect. It's 100 out of 100%. When that person shoots that bullet, that person's going to die. And they don't care what race, religion, or ethnicity someone is. They're going to kill 7 people today. Now, what would we do if there was a sniper on the 405 freeway? I would tell you the 405 would shut down. There would be a law enforcement reaction, be overwhelming. They would send car after car, investigators, detectives, trying to find this one sniper who's killing 7 Los Angelenos every single day. Now imagine there was 100 of these snipers perched all over our freeways system. LA would shut down. You wouldn't go out. Because you wouldn't know if you're the car that's about to get killed. That is the level of killing that is going on in our community every single day. We're going to lose 7 to 10 people today from some level of a fentanyl overdose. That's pretty serious. I mean, that's the kind of serious that we got to stand up and take notice. So not only do I need to go after the fentanyl poisoners, and we are, but I got to educate middle and high school kids to understand that this is not like the old days. You know, guys, I tell them you missed the 60s. The 60s, you could get high as a kite and you're not going to die. The drugs today that fentanyl is designed to kill you. So that education effort has to be made by the people in this room to everybody we care about, so that they understand that this really is this lethal, as lethal a threat as I'm certainly suggesting. And then as far as actually tracking it, you know, we're able to track certain numbers. Part of the challenge is to track the negative. In other words, every time we do an enforcement effort, I'll give you an example. Recently we took 50 pounds of fentanyl in a search in an apartment in Downey on an afternoon, on a Tuesday afternoon. Literally, 50 pounds of fentanyl. You know how many 2 milligram lethal doses that is? 11 million. One apartment, one afternoon, 11 million lethal doses of fentanyl were there. That's how much we're actually dealing with. So I don't know, I can't tell you, we took 11 million illegal doses off the table. I don't know how many people would otherwise have died from that fentanyl, but I'm telling you that's the type of enforcement efforts we're doing every day.
All right, thank you. I think the 405 shooter analogy, we all can appreciate that. We've all probably been out there, so that's a very good one. Good job, thank you. Our next question is homelessness. What specific criminal justice metrics will you use to measure the effectiveness of our office handling of crimes related to homelessness?
And
the second part, or you want the...
You did the second part too.
The second part, how will you ensure our enforcement approach does not criminalize poverty or mental illness?
And that's where I was about to go. Homelessness itself is not a crime. We're dealing with crimes being committed by the unhoused population. I think that's where your question was going. So, for 4 years before I got there, there had been special directives that the prior district attorney passed out that basically prohibited his prosecutors from going after a number of the crimes being committed in homeless encampments. These are crimes, everything from loitering to trespass to certain types of prostitution, to vandalism, to low levels of violent crimes as well, to criminal threats. And what that meant is that if an officer wanted to go into a homeless encampment, and the officer literally saw any of what I just described right there, the officer would think to himself, well, the DA's office isn't going to prosecute it, so why am I going to arrest this person? What's the point? It'll just be released, and the prosecution won't happen, so I'm going to keep walking. Or I'm not, unless it gets serious enough, there is no point for me to go ahead and enter that homeless encampment and deal with them. What I have done is basically removed any prohibitions from law officers doing their job. But what I emphasize to that in doing that, in removing a political agenda called decarceration, which was my predecessor's political agenda, I said what we're going to go back to are the facts and the law. And I'm not going to substitute decarceration and then bring in mass incarceration, another failed political philosophy. Where I've gone is to institute what I've called a hard work middle approach, or the hard middle. And the idea behind it is that we're going to go and we're going to look at each case individually. No more blanket policies. We're going to look at each individual defendant and their background, the crime committed and the impact on the victim, to determine who the true threats are to our public safety. And those are often the repeat offenders. And those are the folks, that will end up in a jail or prison. But just as importantly, the first-time non-violent offender. That person still violates society's laws and has to be held accountable and pay a debt back to society. But that's where non-prison, non-jail alternatives come to play. Whether you go ahead and they do community service, restitution, pay it back if you stole something, or if you got a serious drug addiction that got you to do that crime, we're going to give you a choice. You can go to prison, or you can do an 18-month rigorous, one day at a time rehab program that if you succeed, we're going to give you a certificate and dismiss the crime from your record. This is what the hard middle approach looks like. And so we're implementing it with homeless crime. And one of the units that I've found that is the most successful in dealing with these homeless encampments is something called the HOST unit, H-O-S-T, Homeless Outreach Services Team. Now what they do is that they're a combination of the following groups. You got deputy sheriffs that are trained to deal with the homeless. You got the Department of Mental Health, the Department of Public Works. You used to have the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority, but you'll have the homeless service authorities right there. And they go out as a big group to a homeless encampment, and they execute what's basically a 5-point plan, and they do it over 8 weeks. What are the 5 points? You got to first identify everybody. What does identify mean? Hi, I'm Nathan from the host team. What's your name? How long you been here? What's going on? By the way, here's a bottle of water. I'll see you tomorrow. And they come back the next day. Because then they have to assess the need. Is this a vet, and we need to get this person to the VA? Or is it someone who just lost their job, and we need to see if we can find them a job? Or do they have a serious mental health issue or a drug addiction, and we've got to find some housing with those services? So that's the second part. They identify, they assess, then they do outreach, third part. Which means, can we convince this person, because we're building up trust with them, to go to this other location where there's some housing with the services they need? That's the third point. But the fourth point is they post a sign. So after a couple weeks, they'll post a 14-day sign. And they say in 14 days, the trucks are coming, you're going to take your stuff, put it in a warehouse, but that's your warning. And then the fifth part of the plan is the trucks actually come. They've been doing this since 2017. They've literally moved thousands of people. I've seen it done myself. Under the 101 freeway, the Rio Hondo River. I saw it at the Venice Beach, the 200 tents that were at Venice Beach a couple years ago. I saw it in West LA, right in front of the VA. They've only had to arrest 2 people in moving thousands. Why? It turns out if you treat the homeless compassionately and you give them some real options, they'll actually move voluntarily. You don't have to arrest them. So these are the types of programs, these are the types of approach that we're bringing here in the DA's office.
Wow, okay, thank you. Great answer. If you got here late, we want you to know that we have someone out there with these small pieces of paper. We do have Q&A. Raise your hand. If you have a question, we'll bring you a paper. You can write it down, and we can continue. All right, so just to remind that, and keep your hands up until someone comes by. All right, our third question, prosecutorial discretion. You have rejected blanket policies in favor of individualized case reviews. What specific guardrails are in place to ensure that fair and consistent outcomes across similar cases? And how will your office address the potential for bias to influence individual prosecutors?
Violence to the prosecutors?
I have bias to influence individual prosecutors.
Okay. So we've been given a whole variety of additional tools in the last 5 years to implement in deciding who gets prosecuted and who doesn't. Let me deal with a couple of these different tools. One was called the Racial Justice Act. The Racial Justice Act basically said that it gave power now to a defendant and a defense attorney that they can actually challenge any prosecutorial decision or any charging decision on the basis of saying that it was racially motivated. And the way that they, once they make a challenge, they say to the prosecutor's office, provide us with information that shows effectively how you made the decision and how you make this decision in other types of cases. Looking to see whether there's explicit racial bias, that's the easy one. Let's say there's a text message between two officers saying we want to arrest this person because of their race. That's explicit racial bias, and that we are keyed into that. But the more difficult one is something called implicit racial bias. That's where you just see a pattern. You don't see an obvious sign of racial bias, you see a pattern of it. And the law now allows the defense to raise these issues with the judge. We respond to these issues, and we have to effectively prove to the judge that we did not engage in impermissible racial bias in bringing a charge against a particular person or a particular charge. That is a sea change in the law. Only in the last couple of years has this been on the books. And what it's also done is it's training prosecutors to be very aware of implicit and explicit racial bias when we make the decisions in the first place. Because we know at some point these decisions might be challenged and we're going to have to defend them. Another tool that the state legislature has given is called the Racially Blind Charging Decision Act. Now here's what that is, and you're going to love this one. When an investigative report comes in, we are now obligated in many cases to submit it to an algorithm that strips it of any racial identifiers of a witness, a suspect, a victim, or whatnot. It literally, now we have to make it, we look at it and there's no clue as to what race any of these folks have. And then a prosecutor makes a decision. Do you bring the case, do you not bring the case? Do you bring these charges against this person or not? Then the identifiers are brought back in, and you can look at the entire report unredacted, and you get to make the decision. Does that change your decision in any way, now that you know the race of everyone involved? If it does, then you're going to have to justify what about the additional information about race led you to make a different decision than you made before you knew about the racial identifiers of the various parties. All that information, they can be available to a judge and a defense attorney if they want to challenge this decision. What has happened, though, is that because we have to go through this racially blind charging kind of system, it makes the prosecutors very aware of both implicit and explicit racial bias. So the state legend, this only came online this year, 2025, in Los Angeles County. So in asking the question, do we try every time to make consistent decisions, no matter who in my office is making them or in which office they're being made? Absolutely. Is it perfect? Nothing's perfect. But that's why we have basically the senior level people who watched a whole lot of these decisions, probably hundreds or collectively thousands of these decisions. And if the decision is one that someone's complaining is been made improperly. In other words, they said, well, you charged this in Compton, but you wouldn't have charged it here. Then it goes up the ranks. It can go up to an assistant deputy. It can go up to a head deputy. It can go up to a director, or even someone like our wonderful assistant DA, Gilbert, right here. It can go up to his level. And we do our best to maintain that level of consistency across this enormous county, which is if this county, by the way, was a state in the United States, it would be the 8th largest state. I mean, we've got over 10 million people. The county's budget is $46 billion. I mean, this is an enormous county. But ensuring that consistency and fairness is what we do every single day.
All right, thank you. The next one, police misconduct. What specific steps will your office take to investigate allegations of police misconduct? And how will you use your charging discretion to address police officers who have a history of lying or other misconduct? Please address the protocol of officers' misconduct where the officers have not been charged, yet substantial settlements have been paid out as a result. Please touch upon the Enforcement Agreement and Reforms Act with AG Bonta.
Okay. All right. Before I even tell you what the DA's office is up on this, let me tell you about my own personal experiences. So when I was a federal prosecutor, one of the cases I got assigned to was Operation Big Spender. What was Operation Big Spender? Well, it was an operation that ended up convicting 26 elite deputy sheriffs for stealing money, drugs, and guns from drug dealers. This was back in the 1990s. What had happened was that there was no one, the drug dealers would make these allegations and no one would believe them. But one day they did a sting operation. They caught some of the deputy sheriffs engaging in this theft of drugs, guns, and money from drug dealers. And we eventually unraveled the entire network that was involved. And I personally tried one of the officers to conviction back in the 1990s. So I have no tolerance whatsoever for law enforcement officers who cross the line. But I want to make this crystal clear as well. I've had a chance over the years to work with, literally, either work with or speak with hundreds, or now in this job, thousands of law enforcement officers across this county. I will tell you that the overwhelming number of officers are doing a very difficult and dangerous job extremely well. And those officers will get my respect, my admiration, and my partnership, but I will equally make it clear to officers that cross the line that if they act like a criminal, they will be prosecuted like a criminal. And that is a message I take not just to groups like this, I take it to law enforcement as well. And you know what's interesting? They tell me, sometimes privately, and sometimes openly, that nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. Because the bad cops ruin the reputation for the good cops. And so we have a unit in the DA's office called JSID, the Justice System Integrity Division. When there's any of these allegations of officer-involved shootings or officer misconduct, it goes to the JSID unit. These are some of our most experienced prosecutors. And they look through everything. I mean, they will look through your body-worn camera, your video, your surveillance, text messages, emails. They'll look at the police reports, interview reports. They look at everything when it comes to one of these situations in order to determine whether or not the police officers acted in accordance with the law or whether or not they violated the law. And when it comes to an officer-involved shooting of someone who is unarmed, who ends up dying, those cases go directly to the Attorney General's office. The DA's office doesn't even deal with those particular that sort of subset of officer-involved shootings. So we take these, we spend an enormous amount of time analyzing the facts in each and every one of these cases. These are some of the most difficult fact patterns that the DA's office gets to look at. But I will tell you that we are literally putting the most experienced people to analyze these fact patterns every single time. And one of the other things we do is that we will speak to the victim family. We'll bring them in. We want to hear what they have to say. If they have lawyers, we want to hear what those lawyers have to say before we make a decision. And then we'll make a decision.
Okay, thank you. Next question, wrongful convictions. How will you expand efforts to review wrongful conviction cases? What new resources will you dedicate to this work to ensure that innocent people are not unfairly imprisoned?
So exonerating factually innocent people, I have said, is an absolute mission of justice. That often when I talk about justice or I hold press conferences, you'll hear me announce an arrest, a conviction, a sentence. But one of the highlight moments I had as a DA was actually setting aside a conviction of two people who were factually innocent. And I did it in connection with one of the units in the DA's office called the Justice Criminal Review Unit, or J-Crew. And their sole job is they get constantly fed information about cases where people are saying, look, we're innocent. And what they do, they have investigators, they have trained deputy district attorneys to go back and effectively be like archaeologists. Because a lot of these cases are 10, 20, 30 years old. And they've got to go, and these cases have gone to a jury. The jury is convicted. The judge has sentenced. Almost all of these cases have gone up on appeal and been affirmed on appeal. But then something happened, some new piece of information has come to light, sometimes a decade or 2 decades later. In fact, let me give you an example of a situation I had 2 weeks into becoming the district attorney. There was a situation that J-Crew said, we got one for you. I said, what is it? Well, it was a 15-year-old man, a young boy, 20-year-old young woman, who were believed to be the driver and the shooter in a gang-on-gang murder case. And that case had gone to trial 17 years before. There were 3 eyewitnesses that laid out these 2 individuals as the driver and the shooter. It went to a jury, the jury convicts. The judge sentences. Went up on appeal. The appellate courts affirmed it. 15 years later, now these people always maintain their innocence, but there was the system. The system said that they were guilty. 15 years later, 2 other gang members who were actually in prison came forward with confessions that had a level of detail that they actually had to be the shooter and the driver. So J-Crew quickly gets investigators assigned, analyzes this new information, and confirms that this information is righteous. So 2 weeks into the job, they present this case to me. And I said, well, why am I getting it right now? Why did this go forward before I was the DA? They said, well, my predecessor tried to bring it forward, but he didn't involve the original prosecutor until the original prosecutor who got the conviction 17 years before that new information had come forward. So the original prosecutor went to the judge and said, Judge, we got to slow this down a bit because I don't think there's any new information. So I'm told this 2 weeks into being DA, and I said, we're going to have a presentation that you're going to make to me, and I'm going to have the original prosecutor sit right next to me and hear the presentation himself. And we did. And after we heard the presentation, I said, do you believe that you convicted the right people based now on all the information? And he looked at me and he said, no, I would not have gone forward. If I had that information, I would not have gone forward with the case 17 years before. And now it's December 18th. It's time to get these folks out. You've been in jail in prison for 17 years before Christmas. So we call the judge that has to hear the case. The judge, if we get these people to you on Monday, December 23rd, and we have a hearing to get them out before Christmas, the judge says, I'm on vacation for 2 weeks, starting on December 23rd. But if you can get them here this Friday, December 20th, at 1:30, we'll hold a hearing. So I luckily have people who work in a Bureau of Investigation as part of the DA's office. I turned to the chief, I said, can you send 2 cars and take custody of these people? They're the man and the woman in the middle of California in 2 different prisons. Can you go up, retrieve them, and bring them back so they can be at the 1:30 hearing on Friday, December 20th? They say, well, we've never done it before, but why not? And sure enough, 5 a.m. on that Friday, those 2 cars go into the middle of California. They get these 2 individuals. They drive expeditiously to make it down. And there we were at 1:30. I was with their families who had not seen them outside of a prison setting in 17 years. And a lot of hugs. Then we go into court. And I say, and the judge looks at me and he says, well, this is interesting. I said, why is it interesting? Because I made my appearance. They said, well, we've never had a district attorney appear at one of these type of hearings. I said, well, that's a shame for all the other DAs that didn't show up, because this is a great day. And sure enough, 3 hours later, those 2 individuals were out. And when we held a press conference on it, I said exactly the same thing. I said justice required us to actually set aside convictions for factually innocent people, which means that on this day, justice had a great day. And that's what we do.
And we have a new word for driving real fast, expeditiously. The next question, this is a serious one. What policies do you have in place to address prostitution and sex trafficking in Compton?
So, second month, I was a DA in January. We actually held a press conference to focus on human trafficking. That particular one we held at Figueroa and 106, right there on the corner. And we showed the pictures of what had happened the day before of very scantily clad young women who were on that corridor, engaged as sex workers for human traffickers. We ended up arresting a week later. We did a takedown that was sort of a statewide takedown. 230 people got arrested in Los Angeles. We went after the human traffickers and the pimps. We went after different parts of the organization. And here's what we're going to do. And here's the commitment I will make to you. We are not going to go ahead and pretend that human trafficking, prostitution, the exploitation through force, fear, and a whole lot of other coercion of generally it's young girls, young women, and young boys, and young men isn't occurring. I'm not going to pretend that what we can see with our own eyes isn't occurring because it's inconvenient to prosecute. We're going to go ahead and we're going to prosecute. But here's what we're going to do. With the sex workers themselves, we are going to treat them as the victims. Now, does it mean, and what that means is that we're going to try and get them the counseling that they desperately need to break the hostage level bond that they have with their hostage taker, that being their pimp or their trafficker, and get them into facilities, these nonprofit organizations that exist throughout this entire county and throughout, especially Compton and the surrounding areas, and get them into this counseling. I hope that it works, because we're going to work with these nonprofits as the navigators to try and work with us for this. We're going to go after the pimps and the traffickers, and we now have, again, the ability to bring, they call it serious violent charges, or charges that charge them with both a serious and violent crime dealing with human trafficking. That will then get them additional time in prison. And the goal of doing this, by the way, is not to fill the prisons to the breaking point. I've said in everything I do, that if all I've succeeded in doing after 4 years is filling our jails and prisons to the breaking point, I have failed. So what is the effective measure of what we're trying to do? We're trying to deter the criminals from committing the crimes in the first place, thus making sure that the victims are saved in the process. That's my goal. So we're going to go after the traffickers and send them the same message. You want to keep trafficking in Compton or any place in our community, you're going to go to prison. We're going to go and put you in prison where we can build that case, arrest you, prosecute you, and punish you. We're going to go after the Johns. And the reason we're going to do that is there's both a supply side and a demand side. If you don't have anybody asking for the sex, the sex workers have nowhere to go. The pimps have nowhere to go. They can't make money. So we're going to go after the demand side as well and make sure that the Johns understand if you want to engage in this illegal conduct, there will be consequences for your action. Because at the end of the day, we cannot have it. There's no reason that we should live in a society where we see this every day. I want you to stand up and scream to me and every public official you can find that basically says and demands that we do something about this. I mean, it is, you know, I've raised 3 kids now, and I just have a 10-month-old grandson. I want him to live in LA County the rest of his life. So we have to fix LA County. There is no second there's no plan B here. This is plan A, B, and C to fix both Compton and every city and place in this county.
All right, thank you. The Compton NAACP does Court Watch for the purpose of equality and fairness in our community. would be willing to have an open door policy to address our concerns. So will you be willing to have an open door policy to address our concerns with our Compton Court Watch program?
Absolutely. In fact, I found out about the Compton Court Watch program tonight, and I love it. People actually, or people who care about the criminal justice system, want to take time out of their day to go into a court, watch the judge, watch the prosecutor, watch the defense attorney, and write up a report to let the community know what they just saw. That's fantastic. In fact, I would go one step further, and I will tell you, you want to go up to anybody who's in the district attorney's office and ask them a question about what's going on. I mean, they might not have the time right then and there, they're involved with cases that are ongoing, but I'll make sure that when they have a break, they take the time to answer your question. There's nothing better than making sure that the community is intricately involved in the criminal justice system that is going to directly affect whether or not you are safe or unsafe in this community. Hold us accountable. If you think we're over-prosecuting or we prosecuted too much, let me know. If you think we haven't prosecuted enough or certain crimes enough, I absolutely need to know. And by the way, every community is going to be different. West LA is going to be different than Compton, it's going to be different than Long Beach, it's going to be different than Pomona, Malibu, Lancaster, and the Antelope Valley. So there'll be different needs in different communities. We need to make sure we're being responsive to those needs.
Great, thank you. What is the DA's office relationship with ICE and other federal immigration enforcement agencies?
I required a sip of water before I answer that question. So, the DA's office in no way coordinates with federal civil immigration officials. They don't tell us ahead of time what they're going to do, where they're going to do it, how they're going to do it, how often they're going to do it. If they're coming back and they're going to do it, nothing. And it's gotten problematic, and I'll tell you why it's problematic on the DA side. And I've done my best to make sure these thoughts are known by the federal civil immigration officials. I've got victims and witnesses, documented and undocumented, that are now kind of scared of the courthouse because they're worried that somehow they may be arrested or put in a van and they come to the courthouse. Well, that is unacceptable. If you're a victim and we are prosecuting the person who victimized you, I need you to feel confident enough you can come to the court, testify if necessary, and put that victimizer behind bars if they so deserve it. So that is a very difficult thing that we're dealing with. You know, a population that is actually very concerned about coming to the courthouse. And we're doing everything we can to allay their concerns and tell them, look, we're not going to ask your immigration status if you've been victimized by someone in this county. We're going to prosecute the person or persons who victimized you. That is what we do for a living. You know, and again, I don't know what the future holds. Do I wish that we could get this somewhat coordinated? Sure. But I will tell you, I speak to the sheriff. The sheriff isn't being asked quite yet. He's not being told ahead of time either. The police chief, nothing. I've got 45 police chiefs across this county. They're not being consulted either. So yes, it is creating problems for us. We will deal with these problems. You know, and I will tell you that we'll keep pushing back where appropriate to make sure that we're able to do our jobs on behalf of the safety of the people in this community. And we lost the moderator.
So what they're going to do is, I'll get you back. So we're going to stop our questions, and then we're going to start answering some of the questions from the audience. Because it's so many, we're just going to kind of consolidate some of the questions. And if it's questions that's been already discussed, we're not going to repeat those questions when we got different questions. So we're going to give everybody a chance the questions to be heard, but we won't get to all the questions because it's just as many from the audience. But I did tell them questions that are the same that can be consolidated to ask questions. It doesn't make sense to keep asking the same question and everybody asking the same question, right? And they've already answered some of the questions that people asked on the paper. So I'm going to pull those questions. We're not going to answer questions that's already been asked. We're gonna ask different questions that's come from somebody in the audience, so that's where they're at now.
Okay.
And they know I'll give them this in a minute. No.
So the first question, if public safety is first, where is the police department? Where do they patrol? And I don't know if he can answer that one.
Well, let me explain. It actually is important to explain the role of the DA's office. So what happens in your general, when criminal activity is occurring in a community, the DA's office is not the entity that rolls out. It's law enforcement that rolls out. They go ahead and they build up the case. So if, let's say, a burglary has occurred, they'll go ahead and they'll speak to the victims, and they'll take witness statements. If there's some video footage, they'll go ahead and they'll get the video footage. If someone has a ring camera or whatnot, they'll go ahead and do that. They'll then follow up. They'll see whether or not this burglary is part of a crew. And maybe they have information now that this crew has hit a whole number of houses or stores in a row. Then they'll try and figure out, okay, where the crew is, who's involved with the crew, and then at some point in the process, when they've gotten to the point that they think they've got the evidence to prove the crime against these particular people, they present it to the district attorney's office. That's where we get involved. And we look at the packet that comes in, we make one of three decisions. Either we're ready to file the charges, we file the charges. Now once we file them, that case in the courtroom, that's the DA's office. Now we're in charge. The second thing we can do is we say, look, you've tried real hard, but we just don't have enough evidence because our standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. We've actually got to convince 12 members of the jury to find someone guilty based on the highest standard of proof in the entire system, and they got to do it unanimously. We got to get 12 out of 12 people agreeing that our case is that strong. And that's the standard that we use. So we can file the charges, we can decline, or we can send it back to the police and say, you know what, here's some suggestions, here's what, you got to interview a few more people, kind of tie down some loose ends, and then represent it. And then that's where the DA's office gets involved. So while we will focus, and one of the things that I've done on behalf of all my prosecutors is I removed the special directives that said there were certain crimes and certain criminals that would never be prosecuted. And I said, I'm going to go back to the discretion of these DAs. And I said, look at two things. Look at the facts, look at the law, make your call. Make it a smart call, make sure we have the evidence to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. But I trust these 800 people to do their job. And they are working around the clock. Let me give you one example of that. When I came into office, there was over 10,000 unfiled cases, pending cases. What did that mean? Law enforcement had given the DA's office 10,000 cases that were just sitting there. Some for weeks, some for months, some for years. And I've asked the DAs, and we prosecute 180,000 criminal cases every year. I've asked them to spend extra time, extra effort, and attack that backlog. I'm happy to say that we are now under 6,000 cases tonight, because these folks are working nights, overtime, and weekends to go ahead and actually reduce the number of cases so that we can have decisions, because the victims have been sitting around for weeks, months, and years wondering if their case is going to be prosecuted. We owe it to them to let them know what the decision is. So again, the police will be doing the investigation part, and then we'll be doing the prosecution part.
Okay, good. I'm not sure if we touched this, but how would you deal with the immigration problem with masked agents? How can the Hispanic community feel safe?
Well, with respect to state law enforcement officers, there have been laws on the books for a long time that say that when you go ahead, unless you're in an undercover situation, which is fairly rare, you need to identify yourself, your badge number. There's no mask involved. I know recently when it comes to ICE arrests, that people have said that these ICE agents have been masked. The state just passed a law that basically says you cannot be masked and you have to effectively identify yourself if you're going to arrest someone. I know that the federal government has responded to this state law and say it does not apply to federal agents. They are governed by effectively US law and not California law. I don't know how that's going to play out. I know that the DA's office won't be involved one way or the other.
Right.
That'll be sent into the courts. They'll be dealing most likely with probably Attorney General's office. They might be dealing with the LA City Attorney's office. But we are dealing with the criminal part of it, and it won't be in the DA's office.
Okay. What happens to the 1 million doses of fentanyl? Is there a chance that these doses make it back into the community?
The ones we seize, no. The ones we see are seized or destroyed. But again, like I said, I gave you an example of, I think it was a Tuesday afternoon in Downey, with enough fentanyl to kill everyone in this entire county. We are witnessing literally hundreds of pounds of fentanyl coming in to Los Angeles County every single year. They estimate enough fentanyl comes in here to kill everyone in this county 5 to 10 times over. So, law enforcement is focused on this. The DA's office is absolutely focused on this. And we're working with the schools to try and get the education out to the students. I need your help as well. I literally need your help. I see probably maybe 100, 120 people in this room, but I don't see 100 or 120 people. I see somewhere between 10 and 12,000 people minimum, maybe 25,000 people. Because if you all get on your social media, your text, your email, every time you have a conversation, and you tell people that you learned something about a drug out there that is going to kill more 18 to 40-year-olds than anything else out there, and you put out the word, now we start to make a difference in getting the word out.
Okay. What is being done to assist first-time offenders not to be incarcerated?
So we have a variety of programs for first-time offenders, and again, it depends on what the first-time offense is. If you go ahead and murder someone, the fact that it's your first-time offense or not, it may or may not be taken into account at the sentencing level, but the charging level, murder is murder. But for low-level theft, for certain situations where people are suffering from mental illness, and they've committed effectively a non-serious, non-violent offense, there's a whole variety of diversion programs out there. There's diversion programs out there for veterans. There's diversion programs out there for people with drug addictions, mental illness. And the way a diversion program works is that your lawyer basically says, this person will sign up for this program. Let's take mental illness. It's a 2-year program. You're going to go to a mental treatment facility. They're going to have a whole regimen of stuff you do. And if you do it, sometimes it's inpatient, sometimes it's outpatient. If you succeed after 2 years, that original crime will be dismissed from your record. Now, if you don't succeed, then you get brought back into the criminal justice system, and you're going to have to deal with the consequences of that. So when it comes to your first-time, non-violent, non-serious offenders, we have a whole variety of options to try and get you back on the right path. We hope that you take advantage of it. If you don't, then you're back in the criminal justice system.
Okay, thank you. What does your office do to ensure victims of crime are actually made whole? Financial compensation for the crimes committed against them.
So we have a Bureau of Victim Services, over 50 people that are assigned to do nothing more than provide services to victims from throughout this entire county. Whether it's victims of domestic violence, and they are trained representatives that have dealt with domestic violence situations, and they provide that type of assistance. Whether it's restitution, someone who's now the victim of a theft or a fraud, and they will help you figure out how to file the claims and the forms to tap into either restitution being paid by the criminal, or there's even restitution funds you can tap into to try and get back some of the money that's been stolen from you. So we take victim services at an extremely high level. The woman who runs the Bureau of Victim Services brings over 25 years to the task. She's amazing. She's like a force of nature. She will not allow any victim in the entire, I mean, I taught you, we have 180,000 criminal cases. They got 50 victim service representatives. They somehow do the work, it feels like, of thousands of people. So if there's any victim out there, we make sure that victim gets attended to, even if our victim service reps are working around the clock to make sure it happens.
What does the DA office do to support Compton sheriffs in the city of Compton?
What we do is, and I've had a chance to meet and speak to the Compton Sheriff's Department, and not only just the captain, but the line officers as well. And here's my message. I'll tell you exactly what I said to him. I said, the DA's office is open for business. I said, bring us cases. Not even good cases, I want great cases. I want cases with a ton of evidence that identify crimes committed and the criminal who did them. I want lawfully admissible evidence, of course, because I got to be able to use it in court. And I explained to them that our standard is the highest standard in the land. So they have our full backing to do their job. They do their job, we do our job, and the criminals have an idea that, you know, that we have a changed system. Accountability is back. And I'll give you one example of something that I shared with both the sheriffs and I shared it with local business. And it's an idea that came to me from the Sacramento DA, which is how do you get a warning message out to criminals? So, and I'll focus on retail theft, so they think that now there's some consequences, they'll be held accountable. So we went ahead and we came up with a window sticker, which I'll show you in a moment. Here's a blow up of the window sticker. And it's kind of your low-tech idea. I mean, we've got social media, we've got everything. This is your lowest tech. It's a window sticker that has a warning message, and we've given out 13,000 of these across the county. And the warning message says, warning, this is a protected business. Retail theft will be prosecuted by the Retail Theft Task Force, and then it has a bunch of information on it. The way we gave it out was in window stickers, 6x6-inch stickers that can be stuck at the front of 7-Elevens, convenience stores, big box retailers throughout the entire county. And one of the things we do is that we work with all the sheriff stations and the police stations throughout this county to help back them up with this message. That you criminals, the would-be criminals, who are thinking of coming in and stealing, don't do it. Because this is your warning message. That the police now are going to bring that case to the DA's office, and the DA's office is going to give a fair shot to every one of these cases we get.
All right. Let's give him a big hand. Thank you. So that concludes our program. We're going to bring Mr. Hockman back. I just wanted to say a couple things. A, we learned a few new acronyms. You guys love the acronym. We learned something about J.Crew and HOST. And then we learned a new way to describe how fast we can go. That's good. But what I think we also learned is that we have a DA that cares about what he's doing. The guy is smart, there's no doubt. He knows a lot. But I think I heard some sincerity in his voice as he answered that. And I don't think he tried to answer it to make him look good or his office look good. I think he was as honest as he could be. So let's give him a big hand. Thank you.
So thank you all for your patience, your time, your energy, for showing up. One of the things I love about these town halls is that people on a weeknight, when they could be doing a lot of stuff, I mean, they could be going, watching TV, they could be out and about, talking with their friends, having a bite to eat. But you took the time and effort to show up tonight, to hopefully hear something directly from the district attorney, to meet some of the people from the district attorney's office. Again, I'm sure there's tons more questions that we will be answering over time. This is not a one and done where you're going to see me tonight and never see me again. I will be back. My lawyers are back. They work in the Compton courthouse every single day. So you have my permission. If you have questions, whether it's for me or anybody in the DA's office, reach out to those folks in the Compton courthouse. Reach out through the channels to me directly. I'll do my best to answer those questions. So my huge thanks to all of you for being engaged and interested and energetic about solving problems in your community. Thank you very much.